Hey guys, just to let you know that you can catch these lessons live every Thursday from 6 PM until 7 PM UK or BST time, and that will just allow you to ask any questions that you want and get some answers to them. Without further ado, let's get on with the lesson. Okay, welcome to the second A-level maths free tuition lesson that I'm doing live on YouTube. So today we're going to cover the next part of algebra that we need, which is the factor theorem and algebraic division, which you may be covering currently at school. So let's start off with what the factor theorem is. So with the factor theorem, it's pretty much solely used to figure out how we can divide a algebraic fraction. So what they normally say is if x, so you say something like if x, f of x plus minus a equals 0, then x equals a, or you can say x plus a plus is a factor of f of x. That's how they normally write it in textbooks, right? So if you want, you can ignore this line. So if f of x plus or minus a is 0, then x plus or minus a, sorry, minus plus, so don't forget you have to flip the sign, is a factor of f of x. So that kind of doesn't really make too much sense, right? But let's say if we have something like, if we look at this first question, we have a 6-marker question. Okay, so it says use factor theorem and division to factorize f of x completely. So again, this is an exam question, so let's go through it. So what you need to do first is you need to figure out what we need to do to divide this thing here. Because with a cubic, I can't factorize it from scratch unless x is in every single term, which it isn't in this case. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to figure out how I can divide, or what I can divide this thing by. So what I need to do first is I need to figure out, using factor theorem, what will divide this function without a remainder. Okay, and so what we do is we simply substitute in values. So let's take f of 1, for example. Right, if I sub in f of 1, I get 2 times 1 cubed minus 7, 1 squared minus 17, 1 plus 10. Which, if you work it out, again, I would just use a calculator. So this would be the quickest way to do it. And what I would do is, once you've typed it into a calculator, leave it typed in and just change the number inside the bracket. I'm going to write down a few, right? But just for a few examples. But realistically, you can do the whole thing on your calculator to find out what the factor is. If I press equals, I get negative 12. Okay. So what I want to do next is I want to say, okay, what about increasing this to f of 2? What would that give me? So now I'm going to go through using the arrows on my calculator and change the 1 that I put in, all the 1s, I change them into 2s. And I get negative 36. That's getting further away from 0. So now I'm going to start going, okay, what about f of 0? Well, f of 0 I can just see was going to give me 10. It's a bit closer. What about f of 1? So let's change this to, sorry, negative 1. Let's change this to negative 1. Again, all I'm doing is using a calculator. And what you do in the exam is you'll literally just go through. Sometimes they give it to you, which is lucky. Sometimes you just have to brute force it on a calculator. I get 18. Okay, so this is getting closer to what I need. So what about f of minus 2? If I type in f of minus 2, and again, I'm actually going to write this one out because I have a feeling that this is actually the correct answer. Minus 7, and this is all I'm typing into my calculator, right? Make sure you use brackets. And I get an answer of 0, I'm willing to bet. 0. Okay? So, now, what does this mean from the factor theorem? Okay, so if f of minus 2 equals 0, then x plus 2 is a factor of our expression f of x. this thing up here. And if we remind ourselves what a factor is a number that will divide into another number. So if we said, what are the factors of 16? Well, what can I divide 16 by? Well, I can do 16 times 1. I can do 4 times 4. I can do 8 times 2. Right? So all of these are factors. So with algebra, obviously, we don't just have numbers. We also have a letter involved as well. Okay? So does anyone have any questions about that thus far? Perfect. So if x plus 2 is a factor of f of x, what that means is I can now do algebraic division. Okay? So what I'm going to do here is x plus 2 goes on the outside, and we're using bus stop method. Okay? Exact same way we do long division with numbers, we do a very, very similar thing. Okay? Now, I just want to point out, and if you notice, all I'm doing is I'm actually typing in the algebraic expression exactly as it is, minus 7x squared minus 17x. Now, it's hard to just read through a mark scheme on this because the top row is going to change over time. So you need to follow along very carefully. What you do is you take the first term here and the first term here and you divide them. So what's 2x cubed divided by x? It gives me 2x squared. Then I take that 2x squared and I times it by both things in the divisor. So 2x squared times x gives me 2x cubed again. And that should always happen. Okay, you should always get the same thing. Then I times it by the other thing. 2x squared times 2 is plus 4x squared. Okay? And then what I do is I subtract both lines of these. Okay? Just subtract both lines of those. So 2x cubed minus x cubed is 0. Minus 7x squared minus 4x is minus 11x squared. And it's also really important that you remember the minus comes in between. So there are some issues sometimes when people subtract, but then they don't carry the signs correctly. And then the minus 17x and then the plus 10 is obviously exactly the same. Okay, so now this is nothing anymore. We do the same process again. Okay, the exact same process that we just did. Okay, so we take this 11x squared and we divide it by the first thing in the divisor. So minus 11x squared divided by x is minus 11x. And then what do? We times the minus 11x by everything in the divisor again. So we're just repeating the same process again and again and again. Minus 11x times x is minus 11x squared. And remember, I said that the first thing should always be the same. Okay, because we've divided by it and then we're timesing by it again. Now minus 11x times 2 is minus 22x. Okay, good. Then we do another line and we subtract them. Now this is where the subtraction comes into play. You have minus 11x squared minus 11x squared. So minus and a minus makes plus, so this is minus 11x squared plus 11x squared, which is 0. And again, these should always cancel out. If it ever gets to the point where it doesn't cancel out, then you've made a mistake. Minus 17 minus 22, well that's minus 17 plus 22, which is 5. And obviously the 10 is just carried down. So these are both just carried down because there's nothing underneath them, so we're subtracting nothing. So far, is anyone stuck or does that all make sense to everyone? Okay, so now we do the exact same thing. Again, 5x divided by x is 5. Yeah? 5 times x is 5x. 5 times 2 is 10. Subtract again, and you should get a remainder of 0. If you get a remainder of 0, you are now finished. Okay? So what was the point of all of this? Well, in regular long division, the thing on top of the bus stop is our answer, which in this case is exactly true. So our value now is, you write the divisor in a bracket, x plus 2, and then 2x squared minus 11x plus 5. And you should notice that this will equal, if we were to expand it again, equals 2x cubed minus 7x squared minus 17x plus 10. It's the same thing on both sides of the expression. So this is correct. We're doing this well so far. But now it says, please, well, it doesn't say please actually. What am I talking about? It says, use this to factorize this completely. Okay? So to factorize this completely. So what we need to do is we need to factorize this quadratic. We've factorized quadratics a million times in GCSE, so it should be okay. We're looking for two numbers that times to AC, which is 2 times 5, which is 10. And they must add to B, which in this case is minus 11. Okay? So you can just go through and you can work those out, or you can kind of just using your deductive skills work out what you need to do there. Okay? So is anyone unsure of that? I think that should be okay. Either way, once you factorize this, you should get x plus 2, and you get 2x. Bear with me 1 second. 2x minus 1, x minus 5. If you expand that, that should give you the exact same answer as we started off with. Okay. So again, the best way to learn this topic is to just keep practicing. So it shouldn't make that much sense yet. It should make a bit of sense. And then as we do more and more questions, it'll make more and more sense, okay? But these are all exam questions. Okay, so that's a 6-mark question, so it is meant to be a bit tricky, it's meant to be a bit long. But hopefully you see it's actually not that bad. Okay? So let's go for another one then. So this is a more typical style of exam question, okay, where they can essentially tell you what the factor is. Okay, so for part A here, we have to show, using the factor theorem, that x plus 3 is a factor of g of x. Well, go back up to the factor theorem. Right? If we substitute in a value here and it equals 0, then it's a factor. So they're telling me that x plus 3 is a factor. The way I show this is if I do g of minus 3. I need to flip the sign here. And then to show that, we actually need to do the substitution. So 4 times minus 3 all cubed minus 8 minus 3 all squared minus 35 times minus 3 plus 75. Again, this is kind of long, so all you need to do is substitute that into your calculator. Okay? So again, make sure you're using the chat to ask any questions that you may have, because again, that's the only way you can learn. So treat this like an actual lesson. There should be no kind of fear or anything like that, because no one's going to know who you are anyway, so don't worry about sounding silly. But yeah, substitute this into your calculator, just to double check that we've done this a-okay. And it does indeed equal 0. Okay, make sure that you check though, because if you have substituted it in wrong or you've done something incorrect, you can change it and then get the 2 marks. If, let's say, for some reason I substituted in plus 3 and I just said that equals 0, I get 0 marks. Okay? Whereas if I at least substitute it in, I get 1 mark, so you get 1 mark for substituting in anything. And then you'll also be able to see if you're right or wrong. Okay? It then says, hence show that g of x can be written in the form g of x equal to x plus 3, ax plus b squared, where a and b are constants to be found. So what are they asking us here? Well, all they're asking us to do is factorize it. That's what they're asking us to do. So all we need to do is do the exact same thing as the previous question. We're going to do long algebraic division. Okay, so we put our factor on the outside. Let's not actually put the bracket. X plus 3, bus stop method, and then all of g of x. So 4x cubed minus 8x squared minus 35x plus 75. Okay, and once again, what I'll do is I'll take this very slowly. Okay, but please stop me the second that you are unsure. Okay, so 4x cubed, you divide it by, so you take the first thing here and you divide it by the first thing in the divisor. 4x cubed divided by x gives me 4x squared. If you notice, I also line up. So all of the x cubes go here, all of the x squared, all of the x. Okay, make your work nice and neat so it's easier for the examiner to read and so you don't make mistakes. Then I times it by everything in the divisor again. So 4x squared times x. And if you remember what I said, if you've done this right, these first two things will always be the same, 100% of the time. 4x squared times 3 gives me plus 12x squared. Okay, and now what we're going to do is subtract these. 4x cubed minus 4x cubed is 0. Then you have minus 8 minus 12, which would be minus 20x squared. Okay, and then the rest of it is just dragged down because there's nothing else underneath it. So minus 35x plus 75. Next step, we take the first thing in our new line and we divide it by the first thing in the divisor. So minus 20x squared divided by x, which is minus 20x. Okay, now we times it by the divisor again. Minus 20x times x is minus 20x squared. And once again, these first two things should always be the same. Then we do minus 20x times 3, which is minus 60x. Okay, once again, all we do is subtract. Okay, we just repeat the same process again and again and again until we can't anymore. Minus 20 minus minus 20 is minus 20 plus 20, which is 0. Minus 35x minus 60x is minus 95x. And again with the 75, it's just going to drag itself down because there's nothing left. Okay. Give you a second just to make sure that you're 100% happy with that. Actually, there is a mistake I made. And just while I said that you guys shouldn't make this mistake, I made the exact same mistake. So minus 35 minus minus 60 would be minus 35 plus 60. Okay, so that would be 25x. Okay. Then once again, we divide it. So 25x divided by x is plus 25. And then we times it again. So we get 25x plus 75. Subtract it and we should get 0. Okay. If we get 0, that's a good sign. Okay, that means we can actually continue with the question. If you didn't get 0, then go back and see if you made a mistake like I did and see if you did the minus incorrectly and things like that. Okay? So now what do we do? Well, this top bit is the answer to what the division would be. So we can write x plus 3 and then we can write 4x squared minus 20x plus 25. And that will equal the exact same thing as our question, which is exactly what we want. Okay? So now we need to factorize this. So again, if we label this A, B, C, you're looking for two numbers that times to AC, right? Which in this case is 4 times 2500, and adds to B, which in this case is minus 20. Okay? So whatever you think those numbers are, or again, you can use some of your intuition to work out what those would be. So again, whichever way you prefer to factorize is perfectly acceptable, but you should find that you get 2x minus 5, 2x minus 5. But have a look at the question. It should be something squared. So now we just make it x plus 3, and we have a repeated bracket, so we can make it 2x minus 5, all squared. Okay, so we went through that pretty damn briskly. Any questions about that at all? Okay, that's perfect. So hopefully you're seeing how algebraic division can work and can be useful. Yeah, perfect, makes sense. And yeah, hopefully you can see how the factor theorem also works in this regard. Okay, now we have the next one. So this is another type of question that they can ask you, obviously. But they give you two pieces of information, and if you notice, you have extra unknowns in your original cubic. Right, so we have px and q, which means we can't factorize it until we know what px and q are. But they've also given us this piece of information. They said f of 4 equals 0. So if we were to sub that in right now, we would get 4 cubed plus 6 times 4 squared plus p times 4 plus q should equal 0. That's what that information tells me. Okay? So 4 cubed, hopefully you know that's 64. And then honestly you can just do the whole thing in your calculator anyway. But I'm just going to work out what the numbers are. So 4 cubed plus 6 times 4 squared is equal to 160. Plus 4p plus q equals 0. And they also give me the information f of minus 5 should equal 36. So once again, let's go. Minus 5 cubed plus 6 times minus 5 squared plus p times minus 5 plus q equals, instead of 0, equals 36. So again, let's work out what these numbers are, and you can just use a calculator because it's a calculator paper. But make sure you're putting everything in brackets exactly as I've written it, otherwise you might get the wrong answer. So that'd be 25 minus 5p plus q equals 36. Cool. What might help is if you put all the numbers to one side for both of these expressions. So let's do that quickly. And for this one, that would be minus 5p plus q equals 36 minus 25 is 11. Okay, so we have two unknowns and we have two equations. So we can do simultaneous equations. Okay, so if you ever hear two unknowns and two equations, it's always simultaneous. Okay, so we can label these 1 and 2, and I can do something with 1 and 2 to make one of the unknowns disappear. So if I look at these two equations, I have 4p and q, and I have minus 5p and q. Q is common between both of them, so I can subtract these two equations, and that will give me one variable, one unknown. So if I do 1 minus 2, it doesn't matter which way around you do it, we have 4p minus 5p, which is 9p. Yeah? Q minus q is nothing, so that equals, with minus 160 minus 11 is minus 171. So now all we need to do is divide both sides by 9, which is minus 19. Okay? Is everyone with me so far? Okay, so I think that's fine. Okay. Perfect. So, now once we get one variable in a simultaneous equation, we can work out what the other one is by substituting it in to either one of the expressions. So if we look at equation 1, we can now substitute in our value for p. So we have 4 times minus 19 plus q equals negative 160. So 4 times minus 19 would be minus 76 plus q equals negative 160. So q is equal to minus 160 plus 76, which is negative 84. And that is our answer for part A. That's only 3 marks, so the marks in terms of where you get them is you get a mark for getting P and Q correct, obviously, and another mark for setting up a simultaneous equation. That's where you get your 3 marks from. So I'll let you just have a second to think about that and see if it makes sense. So now we can go into part B. So part B, factorize it completely. Well, again, what you should know is it's a cubic, so we need to use algebraic division. So we're going to use the fact that f of 4 is 0. So what we're going to divide by is x minus 4. Remember, we have to swap the sign in front of the number. Okay? And then we're dividing, what are we dividing? We're dividing x cubed plus 6x squared. P was minus 19, so minus 19x. Q was minus 84. Okay, and now we can actually do the division. So x cubed divided by x gives me x squared. Times it by everything in the divisor again, so we get x cubed minus 4x squared here. And then we're subtracting. X cubed minus x cubed should always equal 0, so that's a good job. I'm going to stop writing the zeros, but let me know if it confuses you a bit. And then we have x squared times minus 4, which would be, we're doing 6x squared minus minus 4, which would be 10x squared, right? Because the minus and minus becomes positive. And these two things, because there's nothing underneath them, we just drag them down. Cool. Then again, we start the process again. Divide. So 10x squared divided by x gives me plus 10x. 10x times x gives me 10x squared, and again, the first thing should always cancel. 10 times minus 4 is minus 40x. There we are. Subtract again. 10x squared minus 10x squared is again 0. Minus 19 minus minus 40 would be minus 19 plus 40, which would be 21x. And the 84 should come straight down. Yep. Again, divide. So plus 21. Times it again. 21x. Times by minus 4 would be minus 84. All cancels out. We're good to go. So what we're factorizing is x minus 4 and x squared plus 10x plus 21. Okay, and we're looking for two numbers that would times to give 21 and add to give 10. So hopefully you are fine with that. Is anyone unsure of how to do that? So in this case, two numbers that times 21 and add to 10 would be 7 and 3, so we can just shove them straight into brackets. Okay, are there any questions so far? No? Okay. Perfect. So, again, very similar question, okay? Except it goes a little bit further for part B. Just a little bit. So, let's get to it. First step, I'm hoping, should be relatively easy for you to do. Relatively. And all we need to do here is factor theorem. So if x minus 2 is a factor, then f of x equals 2 should equal 0. So again, you need to do the substitution first. It's also a good way to check if you've done the question right. Right? And see what that equals. So again, let's type it in our calculator. 2 times 2 cubed minus, 2 squared minus 13 times 2 plus 14. So stuff that in, and you do get 0. Easy 2 marks. So part B, hence or otherwise. So again, if you remember from our previous lesson, the word hence means using part A. Okay, so this is obviously an important piece of information. So what we're going to be using is the fact that x minus 2 is a factor to do, as we've done 1,000 times so far, long algebraic division. Okay, So again, take the first thing here, divide it by the first thing in the divisor. 2x cubed divided by x is 2x squared. Then times it by everything in there. So 2x cubed minus 4x squared, and then subtraction. You get 0 minus 1 minus 4 will give me plus 3x squared. And these things come straight down, and we get minus 13x plus 14. Divide it again, we get plus 3x. Times it again, 3x squared. So you can see how quickly you'll be able to do this eventually. Slowly speed up to build confidence. 0 minus 13 minus 6 would give me minus 7x, and then the 14 will come straight down. Divide it, you get minus 7, and times it by minus 2, you get minus 7x, and then you get plus 14. Which again, if you subtract, will give me 0. So my equation has now become x minus 2, and we get 2x squared plus 3x minus 7. Okay, and we want to solve that equals to 0. Now they give us a hint. 2 decimal places. So I know I can't factorize this, right? Because it's going to give me a decimal. So what can I do instead? Well, what I can do is if this bracket here equals 0, then the whole thing equals 0, right? So all I need to do is solve this, and we're going to be using the quadratic formula. Minus b plus minus the square root b squared minus 4ac over 2a, where a is equal to 2, b is equal to 3, c equals minus 7. Okay, and you should get 2 values of x. Okay, 2 values of x you get are 1.27 after you sub it in, rounded to 2 decimal places. X equals minus 2.77. Now, is that it in terms of our solutions? The answer is no. This is a cubic, which means it should have 3 solutions. So we also have a solution from here, which is that x equals 2. In fact, we did that in the first part. So the cubic, there should be 3 answers. The answers could all be the same, but there should be 3 answers nonetheless. Okay. So just keep that in mind. If you have a cubic, you should have 3 answers. The answers can be the same, so there might only be 2 unique ones, but there's definitely 3 answers in total. And again, that's including that first bracket. Those are all the possible values of x, such that this whole thing equals 0. I went through that pretty quickly, just to show you what can be done, how fast you can get these things done. Is there anyone that's unsure? Okay. Perfect. So let's go on to the next one. And again, as you can see, the question's getting a bit more simple in its language. Okay. Part A. Given that x minus 2 is a factor of f of x, find the value of k. So what I'm subbing in is f of 2, and that should equal 0. So let's sort it out. 2 cubed is 8, plus 2k minus 2, 0. So 8 minus 2 is 6. 6 minus 3. So just move the 6 over to the other side by minusing 6 and divide by 2. And then hence it's saying to solve the equation f of x equals to 0. Cool. So what we're going to have is x minus 2 on the outside, because once again we're doing algebraic division. And then we have just the equation. So x cubed, instead of k, we're now going to put minus 3, because we know what it is, minus 2. Okay. X cubed divided by x gives me x squared. So in this case, it can be tricky to read the answer. I'm just going to put it right above because we don't have any squared in this case. Times it by the cubes, we get x cubed minus 2x squared. And if we subtract it, what might have helped in this situation is, if you'd like, if it skips over one of the things, you can always put plus 0x squared minus 3x minus 2. Okay? Subtract that, you get 0 minus minus 2, so 0 plus 2, which is 2x squared. And these bits just get dragged down because there's nothing underneath them. Minus 3x minus 2. Divide by x, you get minus 2x. Times it again, you get, hang on a minute, that should be plus 2x squared. And then minus 4x. Again, subtract it. So you get 0. Minus 3 minus minus 4 gives me x. And that would be minus 2. Divide it, you get 1. 1 times x is x. And then you get minus 2. Subtract, you get 0. Just so you know, you don't always get 0. Okay? So if I had a remainder here, let's say of 3, okay, that is possible. And one of those questions is coming up. Okay, so if you want to see what that looks like, just stay around for a little bit longer. And it's saying for me to solve this now. So x minus 2, x squared plus 2x plus 1 equals 0. So we need to factorize this little bit here, or use the quadratic formula, whichever one you prefer. But we want, so if this is a, b, c, we're looking for two numbers that times to 1 and add to 2. So the only numbers there are x plus 1 and x plus 1, right? So just 1 and 1. So in other words, we have x minus 2. Actually, if I leave it there for a second, hold on. I just want to prove something to you. Our solutions now are going to be whatever the opposite of these brackets is. So x equals 2, x equals minus 1, and x equals minus 1. There's always 3 solutions. But because 1 is repeated, we don't have to include it. But there's still 3 answers. It's just 2 of them are the same. Okay? Hope that makes sense. Perfect. So again, 6 marks should have taken us 6 minutes. It only took us about 3. And again, that's with me somewhat explaining what I'm doing. So this isn't a bad topic, but if you don't practice this, you will make a mistake in the exam. Because it's very easy to make a mistake, as I did earlier. Okay, incredibly easy. Okay, so once again, it's the same question, but different wording. So, we have this equation here. Use the factor theorem to show that x equals minus 3 is a solution. Okay, so it's slightly different wording, but all they're asking me to do is use the factor theorem to show that this is true. Again, just flip the sign. Okay, so let's sub it in. Okay, and then just use a calculator to sub it all in. And you should get 0. And then again, they change the wording. Instead of solve the equation or find the solutions, they say find the other solutions. But that's only because we have one solution. One solution is x equals minus 3. Yeah? But it's the same thing. So all we need to do is do that x plus 3 and do the algebraic division yet again. By the end of this, you should be bored of this. So if you're getting bored, that means you're learning. That means you understand it and it's getting easy. If you aren't bored, it means you're still learning. Okay? So just make sure you stick around for a bit longer. X cubed divided by x gives me x squared. Times it again. I'm going to try and get through this slightly quicker. 3x squared. Subtract. 3x squared. Divide by x. And then we can put the 4x here. Once again. Okay, just to see how fast we can get it done, minus 5x, and then there'll be a plus 5 on the end. That should be a 15 actually. It is a 15, it just looks very, very not like one. And then that'll be minus 5, and you get minus 5x minus 15. Goes down to 0. A-okay. So that's how quickly you can do those divisions. Okay, but again, don't focus that much on speed. They give you 5 minutes worth of time to do that, which is a long time. Anyways, we have x plus 3, and we have x squared plus 3x minus 5 equals 0. And again, we're looking for 2 solutions. Now again, remember the hint they gave us. They've given us the hint that it gives... We want answers to 2 decimal places, right? If I look at this, are there any numbers I can think of that times to minus 5 and add to 3? No, because they're long decimals. So once again, we're going to be using the quadratic formula to answer this. A equals 1, B equals 3, C equals minus 5. Does anyone need me to use the quadratic formula and go through it once? Or are you all okay? I think you might be okay, but I'm not sure. Should be okay, right? So again, if you just type the whole thing into your calculator, so give me a second just to do that. You should get x equals 1.19. Again, it says to 2 decimal places. Minus 4.19. And we don't actually have to include the x equals minus 3 because the wording of the question says other solutions. Okay? So again, read the question carefully, but again, they're just asking you to do the same thing over and over and over again. Okay? So now we're coming on to a few more of the exam questions. We're actually approaching the end. This does come up every year, but it only usually comes up maybe once or twice, right? So in the whole year, which means there aren't that many questions on it. Now, if you have your textbook, obviously you have a fair few more, but I'm only going to be doing the exam questions for now. If you do have a textbook question that you want me to help you with, the best thing to do is to, in the description of this stream, I have an email address. You can email me any questions you have and I'll get back to you, okay? I'll give you a written solution for that. Or I'll make a video on it and then send you the link to the video, whatever. Okay? Anyways, prove that x minus 4 is a factor of f of x. Don't know why I wrote 4. Cubed minus 13. It's 48. And once you sub that in, you get 0. So you might have noticed that there's a part A but no part B, right? There's a reason for that. There is a part B in the exam paper, but it's actually beyond this lesson. So you're going to be using this again in the future when you do integration and differentiation. Okay? So that's why it's not here at the moment, because we haven't covered integration and differentiation, and I'm not going to for a little bit. So there's no point in me including part B, C, and D for this question, because you wouldn't be able to do it. Okay, but just so you're aware, this comes back in future topics. Okay? And this question actually isn't that bad. Right, so if x plus 3 is a factor, then that means f of minus 3 equals 0. And that's due to the factor theorem. Okay? So if anyone asks you what the factor theorem is, you should know how to explain it. So let's use that information. So we have 3 times minus 3 cubed. 3 cubed is 27. Plus 2a times minus 3 squared. Minus 4 times minus 3. Plus 5a equals 0. So let's work out the numbers, okay? So we have 3 times minus 3 cubed. That gives me minus 81. Minus 3 squared is 9. Times 2 is 18. Minus 4 times minus 3 is plus 12 plus 5a equals 0. Gather the a's together. 18 plus 5 is 23a. Minus 81 plus 12 will give me an answer of minus 69 equals 0. So move this over to the other side by adding it. You have 23a equals 69. So a is equal to 69 over 23, which is 3. And that will be our answer. So again, there's a few ways they can ask you to use the factor theorem. Okay. Give you a second just to copy that down. Any questions at all? Perfect. Okay. Good to see. Okay. So, we do have a few more. Before I go on, does anyone have any questions about any of that? Sounds like it's all okay. So what I'll do is I'll do the next two questions. Stop me if it doesn't make sense. So use the factor theorem to show that x plus 2 is a factor. So hopefully you're seeing a little pattern here, that these are always the same. Okay. 4. Does indeed equal 0. And hence show that it can be written in the form. Okay, so we have x plus 2. And then we're dividing 4x cubed minus 12x squared minus 15x plus 50. 4x cubed divided by x gives me 4x squared. 4x squared times x gives me 4x cubed. 4x squared times 2 gives me 8x squared. And then let's do the subtraction. Minus 12 minus 8 will give me minus 20x squared. These bits will come down, so we have minus 15x plus 50. Divided by x, you get minus 20x. That should be the exact same as it was before, 20x squared, because it always is. Times it by 2, you get minus 40x. Once again, we're going to do subtraction. Minus 15 minus minus 40 would be plus 25x. And that 50 comes straight down. So we have divide by x, you get plus 25. Times by x, you get this. Do the subtraction, you get 0. So in other words, you have x plus 2, 4x squared, minus 20x, plus 25. Okay, which is actually one that we've already factorized previously, if you remember. So if we go up and find that, we don't have to redo the whole thing. Where was it? Yeah, 2x minus 5 and 2x minus 5. Whoops. So we have x plus 2, 2x minus 5, and since we've got it twice, we can just put it as a little square. Okay. Okay, so that pretty much covers algebraic fractions and the factor theorem. So again, it was a kind of annoying, long, tedious part, but like I said, it does come up in future topics for A-level maths. Okay, so things like integration, differentiation, partial fractions, all of that fun stuff. So, we had to cover it. And sometimes maths is just all about doing 500 questions, okay? So, I'm fine to stop it here. I thank you all for joining in and having a look. And just for those of you watching on YouTube later, these are all live every Thursday, 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. So the benefits of joining is that you do have a direct line of communication to me. You can ask me any questions, ask if you're stuck. You can also send me any suggestions you have, so certain questions you want me to do, topics you want me to do, things like that, which is always fun and useful. But feel free to comment if you have any suggestions or you have any questions that you want to do. But other than that, I'm going to wish you all a wonderful evening, and I hope to see you in the next one.